Number 8. Heinrich Himmler. When thinking about evil people, a lot of people are quick to say Hitler, and for good reason too. But what about the other Nazi leaders? Surely Hitler wasn't the only one committing atrocities during the dark period that was the Holocaust. There were many who perpetrated and stood for the inhumane beliefs of the Nazi Party, not just the leader of the Third Reich. Heinrich Himmler was one of them. Heinrich started life off as the humble son of a schoolteacher, but would soon come to the dark side when World War II broke out when he was just a teenager. He became involved with Nazi activities and served as their propaganda leader for 4 years until he got promoted. This new job allowed him to serve up close and personal with the famous mustachioed man as the head of the SS, Hitler's bodyguards. With his new connections, Heinrich's power soon grew, and in 1933 he became the head of the police. It was in this same year he ordered the construction of Dachau, the first concentration camp of the Holocaust. Just like his boss, Heinrich was obsessed with German racial supremacy. Using his position of power, he set up and promoted breeding programs for Aryan citizens. Then, with the chaos of the Second World War, he started pursuing a much more sinister goal: the annihilation of the Jewish people. He didn't even consider Jews to be people. That's how deeply his hatred ran. As head of the police, Himmler had total control of the Einsatzgruppen, otherwise known as the section of the SS specializing in killing. He ordered these men to assist in the mass murder of disabled people, the Jewish, opposing government leaders, and more. At one point in time, he ordered over 33,000 people in Kiev to dig their own mass grave, then stand in it as they were shot like livestock. A rough estimate says about 1.5 million people died in a similar way during this period. By playing a leading role in the deadly final solution of taking so many innocent lives and establishing labor concentration camps where workers would ultimately meet a gruesome end, Heinrich is responsible for the deaths of over 2 million people. This makes him one of the most evil men in history. 7. Ivan the Terrible. Russia has been a great and powerful nation for centuries and is often regarded as having some of the strongest men and women in the world. So if that's what people think about their regular citizens, what would their leaders be like? Well, let us introduce you to the first Tsar of Russian history, Ivan the Terrible. And as his name would imply, he wasn't exactly a nice guy. He amassed the mega country that is Russia by creating an unstoppable military force and ruthlessly seizing the land of his enemies. As the grandson of Ivan the Great, this fearsome leader had a lot to live up to. Both of his parents died before his 9th birthday, leading to a vicious battle for the throne. It was really no place for a child to grow up, and it sort of provides an explanation for his ruthless behavior later on in life. And as if that wasn't bad enough, he apparently thoroughly enjoyed torturing small animals as a kid. So, as you know, one of the token signs of a sociopath or future murderer. When his first wife died in 1560, Ivan became deeply depressed, which historians theorize sparked some later outbursts. He suspected that someone had murdered her, so he responded by having any and everyone that could even possibly be a traitor executed. He also enjoyed torturing his political rivals. Just a few of his favorite methods were impaling people, roasting a man over a fire, slowly having limbs torn off by horses, or boiling people alive. At one point, Ivan started to believe the church was against him too, so he had all the priests and monks collected and beaten to death. It's believed that he killed about 12,000 people in these gruesome methods, but it could actually be more. And as if that wasn't bad enough, as Ivan got older, so did his mind. He already was thought to have had mental issues at an early age, but they became more severe with the years. As an older man, Ivan one night accidentally walked in on his daughter-in-law while she wasn't fully dressed. In response to this, he beat her nearly to death. And here's a kicker: she was pregnant. Her injuries were so bad that she had a miscarriage. Upon hearing the news of his wife, Ivan's son confronted his father. But this would be the last thing he ever did. Ivan killed his son with his very own hands. If that's not evil, we don't know what is. 6. Leopold II of Belgium. Do you know anything about Belgium's history of monarchs? Unless you were born in the country itself or a neighboring one, the answer is probably no, or at least not much. But hiding in this line of royalty is a sinister man with a heart full of hatred and his mind that only had one thing on it: power. His name was Leopold II. As ruler of a tiny European country, Leopold craved more. His neighbors of the British and Spanish were busy establishing colonies all over the world, while he had none. So you can imagine his delight when the world powers decided to give him control of the Congo in the 1880s. His new territory was almost 80 times bigger than the whole country of Belgium. But the people in the Congo had no clue what was about to happen. Leopold essentially set up a system of slavery in the Congo, so he could profit off of the hard work of his new people. He even taxed these workers who were basically working for nothing, and if they couldn't pay up, he held their wives and children captive. When the Congo people were fed up, they tried to revolt and push back, but Leopold wasn't ready to lose his new powers. He sent his private army to burn villages down and decapitate the uncooperative while killing women and kids. And if this doesn't sound all that bad, just wait until you hear how many people were affected. Historians who studied the event say that over 8 million people were killed as a result of the harsh conditions Leopold placed on the Congo. When the tyrant finally died, a year after Europe took back his rule over the Congo, much of the world rejoiced. Did you know anything about Leopold II? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 5. Nero. The Roman Empire was one of the greatest civilizations this world has ever seen, but that had little to do with the greatness of some of their leaders, one of which being Nero, the bloody ruler. Coming into power at 17 years of age, he was the youngest emperor Rome had ever seen. We'd like to remind our viewers that the mind of a 17-year-old is far from being fully developed or mature. The reign of Nero only lasted 14 years, but in that short amount of time, the young ruler managed to attract the hate of a nation. One of the things he's most famous for is playing the fiddle during the Great Fire of Rome. This nonchalant attitude, while much of the city was up in flames, led many to believe he had a role in setting the fire for his own agendas. When the embers died down, he blamed the Christians for the spread and used the opportunity to slaughter them. He even used some human torches to light up his estate. Thousands were killed by his orders, nailed to crosses, fed to dogs or lions, or starved to death. On top of this, Nero was responsible for the deaths of his mother, stepsister, wives, stepbrother, and more of his close relatives. He was a raging satromaniac, the male version of a nymphomaniac, and often raped women and men alike. He even cut off the genitals of some of his victims. After finally getting tired of his thoughtless, harsh antics, a political uprising overthrew the young emperor, forcing him to take his own life. The last words that left his mouth were, "What an artist died in me." Yeah, he was a real artist. From hell. 4. Killer Countess. In all of vampire lore and mythology, the most famous bloodsucker has to be Dracula, rivaled only perhaps by Edward from Twilight. But as far as female creatures of the night, Elizabeth Bathory is said to be history's most well-known female vampire. Well, we don't know if she was actually a bloodsucker, that's all just speculation, but we'll let you decide after you hear the terrible things the famed Countess did. On top of being a so-called vampire, Elizabeth is also a brutal serial killer. At the age of 11, she became betrothed to HEINRICH Nastadi, a young man from a wealthy Hungarian family. Sadly, the girl had a secret lover who wasn't so high in rank. The two of them had a child together, and when her fiancé found out, he was furious. HEINRICH had her lover's genitals cut off, then threw into a pit to be eaten by dogs. Not exactly the best impression to leave on your future wife. While they were married, HEINRICH was often away from the estate, leaving Elizabeth to do as she pleased, which not only involved having affairs, but torturing innocent girls. It all started with a daughter of nearby peasants who served as servants of the Countess's castle. She had a strange belief that the blood of these young women would keep her youthful and beautiful, so she did what any appearance-obsessed psychopath would do. She killed them and bathed in their blood. Her method of murder was especially bloody. Sometimes she would stab them, and other times she'd bite their body parts or cut them with scissors. She was even reported to burn them with hot metal and stab their lips with needles. After her deeds were discovered, she was confined in a room in isolation. She would have received a harsher punishment if only her status wasn't so high. The vampire countess died alone in her room in 1614, hopefully being cursed in the afterlife by her many victims. 3. Josef Mengele. Everyone knows how horrible the Holocaust was. As the Nazi Party oversaw the extermination of millions, their bloody streak on history was deathly apparent. And one man, a doctor, if you dare call him that, performed gruesome experiments on prisoners at the notorious Auschwitz concentration camp. Close to 500,000 Jewish people lost their lives thanks to the orders of Dr. Josef Mengele, but he kept some of them alive for medical experiments. His goal was to learn the secrets of humanity to create the ultimate Aryan super race. Mengele was especially obsessed with twins. He thought they were somehow superior and the answer to all his questions. One of his harsh experiments including him impregnating a young twin girl with sperm from yet another twin imprisoned by him. The girl was pampered and cared for during her 9 months of pregnancy, but after Mengele realized she would not give birth to a pair of twins, he ripped the child out of her uterus and threw it into a nearby oven. A survivor of Auschwitz described how she had given birth at the camp. After the child was born, the mother's breasts were bandaged. The doctor simply wanted to see how long a baby could last without food. Eventually, the mother was ordered to kill her own child with an injection of morphine. These accounts are just a fraction of the atrocities Josef committed. He truly had no respect for human life or sympathy for the men, women, and children he tortured and killed. 2. Baby farmer. Although not nearly as prolific a killer as some other names on this list, Amelia Dyer is one of the most well-known murderers in the history of England. In her early life, she served as a nurse and midwife for expecting mothers, but a few years later, she would shift trades to become a baby farmer. Not exactly the most welcoming of job titles. Baby farmers were known to adopt illegitimate children for a fee, saying the child would grow up in a welcoming and loving environment. If you can read the title of this video, then you know that's not what happened. Not at all. At first, Dyer refused to feed the children in her care, forcing them to starve to death. Later on, she'd use a more efficient method. By using a syrup with opium in it, ironically called Mother's Friend, and then murdering the young ones in her care. She was eventually found out after the body of a young child was found in the Thames and traced to Amelia. When the police came to her estate to investigate, they were immediately overwhelmed by the smell of death. Strangely, though, no bodies were discovered in the house. But as more children were found in the river, she admitted that the ones she killed had white tape on their necks. She's reported saying, "That was how you could tell it was one of mine." It's believed Dyer killed anywhere from 200 to 400 kids with this method. Because of her emotionless attitude towards killing, some believe she could even be the notorious mysterious killer Jack the Ripper. But that's only a theory. Even if she wasn't, she was still an extremely evil lady. 1. Ilse Koch. In 1930, a young woman named Ilse Koch joined the Nazi Party. She, along with many Germans at the time, were drawn to the party's ideals of fixing Germany and getting back the reparations the world owed them after World War I. Eventually, she married Karl Otto Koch, the commander of the Buchenwald concentration camp. Koch used her husband's rank to her advantage. She gathered up the money taken from incoming prisoners and used it for herself. She ordered the construction of a $62,000, nearly $1 million today, arena to be built just so she had a place to ride her horses around. At Buchenwald itself, she'd often taunt prisoners and whip them. It's reported that she even seemed excited when children were sent to their deaths at the gas chambers. But this isn't what earns her a place on this list. Ilse had a disgusting hobby of collecting items made out of human skin. She would inspect those being held in the camp and pick out prisoners with interesting tattoos. At her order, they were then skinned alive and sent to be incinerated. Some of the items she made included lampshades, covers for books, and even gloves she'd wear as some kind of sick trophy. Evil. No doubt. Ten, the Cannibal Cop. Gilberto Valle spent 21 months in jail before having his conviction overturned back in 2014. A judge ruled that he did not pose any immediate danger in real life. He was initially jailed back in 2012 on conspiracy of kidnapping when his wife at the time, Kathleen Mangan, told the police that he was plotting to murder and then eat over 100 women, with one of those women being her. She had initially grown suspicious of Gilberto when he began spending long nights on the computer in their house. The FBI actually went into his computer and discovered photographs of women, searches for abduction methods, and that Gilberto had been frequenting fetish websites for people who are interested in eating human beings. But here's where things get even more strange, because Gilberto never actually killed anybody. He never said that he wanted to kill anyone. He was simply role-playing online with other weirdos. It was basically an extremely disturbing game of Dungeons and Dragons, which under absolutely no law is illegal. Yet despite Gilberto merely discussing cannibalism online, he lost his wife, he is unable to see his daughter, and he was fired as a police officer. He also had to spend almost 2 years in jail before his appeal was finally heard and he was let out. 9. Meat Pastries. The Cannibal Cop may not have literally killed and eaten anyone, but Jorge Beltrajo Negromonte de Silveira certainly did. So did his wife, Isabel Perez, and his mistress, Bruna Cristina Oliveira. These 3 sick people were arrested back in 2012 in Brazil. They got busted luring young women to their house by offering them high-paying work as a nanny. The only problem was that there was no nanny job. Instead of hiring these girls for work, Jorge and his lovers murdered them and then ate their dead bodies as part of a bizarre purification ritual. Then whatever was left over from their human meal would be turned into meat for empanadas, which one of the women would sell to unsuspecting customers on the street. This is taking cannibalism to a whole new level. The residents of the small city of Guarulhos were appalled when they learned what the trio had been doing. The most disturbing part for the locals was not knowing whether they had gotten an empanada filled with human meat or normal cow meat. Hundreds and hundreds of people in the town had purchased food from the group, making it impossible to know who had been unwittingly fed human flesh. 8. The Green River Killer. Gary Leon Ridgway wasn't exactly a cannibal, but he was still one of the sickest people in the world. He's also not dead yet, and is still technically among us, though he's locked up tight in jail. You might know him better as the Green River Killer, who terrorized women from between 1982 and 2001. According to his official biography, he has killed upwards of 80 women, most of them along Route 99 in Washington. When Gary started killing, nobody immediately took notice. Young runaway kids and prostitutes started vanishing from King County in Washington. He would pick these girls up from the side of the road, then take them back home, and then strangle them and dump them in the woods. After a little while, bodies began turning up on the shores of the Green River. He went on killing without interruption for nearly 20 straight years until King County Sheriff Dave Reichart re-examined old evidence using newly developed DNA technology. They were able to match Gary Ridgway to 4 dead victims, though he was ultimately charged and pled guilty to 49 counts of first-degree murder. Today, Ridgway has the record for the highest body count of any serial killer in United States history. 7. Barbecue Butcher. Joseph Roy Metheny was recently found dead in his cell in Maryland. There aren't too many people upset about it, seeing as Joseph was a bit of a cannibal who was serving 2 consecutive life sentences. He was being held at the Western Correctional Institute in Maryland, locked up for a series of brutal murders in the 1990s. The method of murder was strangulation via extension cord. Then, to get rid of all the meat he didn't use, he dumped her body in a shallow grave. Kathy was discovered several years later without a head. The murders didn't stop there. In total, Joseph was charged with murdering 2 women. He was also nearly charged with a double murder when 2 homeless men were chopped up into pieces with an axe. However, there was never enough evidence to convict him, and so the charges were dropped. In 1998, Joseph begged the courts to kill him. They agreed and gave him the death sentence. The death sentence was shortly after overturned, though, and Joseph was given life sentences instead. He served 20 years and died in his jail cell at the age of 62. 6. Katherine Knight. Katherine Knight was the first woman in Australia to be given life in prison without the possibility of parole. The punishment may not seem that extreme to anyone in the U.S., but it's pretty major for Australia. Katherine received the life sentence after she got caught killing her partner back in February of 2000. Katherine stabbed her boyfriend. To better understand what happened here, we need to back up. Katherine, throughout her life, had a string of bizarre relationships and a history of mental problems. On the night of her wedding to her first husband, she tried to strangle him to death because he had performed inadequately in the bedroom. John Price had actually been Katherine's lover. She had been dating him while with a different man named John Chillingworth, whom she had a child with. She and Price dated for 5 years before he finally got sick of how crazy she was and kicked her out of the house. It was the day after John went into court and got a restraining order that Katherine snuck into his house in the middle of the night and stabbed him to death with a butcher knife. Katherine was found by the police passed out in the house after she had taken too many pills. Price's head was in a pot of tepid water and vegetables, while the table had been set with pieces of cooked human meat. 5. The Yorkshire Ripper. The next psycho isn't exactly the kind of cannibal that eats people, but his hunger for killing is what landed him on this list. Peter Sutcliffe is known as the Yorkshire Ripper. At least he was until 2020, when he died at the age of 74 after contracting COVID-19. According to CNN, the Yorkshire Ripper was convicted way back in 1981 for killing 13 women and attempting to murder 7 more. This was during a brutal reign of terror in the north of England that lasted from between 1975 and 1980. Why did Peter kill so many women? During the court proceedings in 1981, he told everyone that he was on a mission from God to kill as many prostitutes as he possibly could. His first murder was in October of 75. The victim was Wilma McCann, local sex worker and mother of 4. Peter walked up to her, beat her to death with a hammer, and then stabbed her until his arm got tired. Peter later told police that after this first murder, he couldn't stop. He developed an insatiable hunger for killing and a boiling hatred for prostitutes. 4. Cannibal Brothers. Hayden Irving Clark is a murderer and cannibal currently serving a life sentence at the Western Correctional Institute in Cumberland, Maryland. He was born in 1952 in New York and grew up with his siblings, all of whom were brutally abused by their alcoholic parents. When drunk, his mother would dress him up in girls' clothing and call him girls' names. And yeah, the emotional and physical abuse took a serious toll on Hayden and his 3 siblings. It's no surprise that both Hayden and his brother, Branfield Clark, turned into murderers. His brother Branfield got caught murdering his girlfriend, cutting her into small pieces and then cooking and eating her. He did this while drunk. When he sobered up, he actually phoned the police and confessed to the crime. Hayden himself started killing in May of 1986. His neighbor, a 6-year-old girl named Michelle Dorr, came to his house looking for his niece. She wasn't there, but Hayden told him that she was up in one of the bedrooms. He then followed her up the stairs, cut her apart with a knife, ate part of her body, and buried her in a shallow grave. The police didn't even suspect Hayden of the crime, and instead thought the girl's father was responsible. In 1992, he killed again. Hayden dressed up in women's clothing and then snuck into Laura Houteling's bedroom. At gunpoint, he forced her to take a bath, then wrapped her face with duct tape until she suffocated to death. He ended up getting caught in 1993 for the murder and is still in jail to this day. 3. Crossbow Cannibal. Not long ago, in June of 2009, a criminology student named Stephen Griffith started hunting prostitutes in the Bradford city centre in England. He has since been nicknamed the Crossbow Cannibal because he would go out at night and literally hunt prostitutes using a crossbow. After he shot one, he would take her home, dismember her in his bathtub, cook some pieces, eat other pieces raw and then dump whatever he didn't use in the nearby river. Between 2009 and 2010, he brutally murdered and cannibalized 3 women. The remains of the first victim still haven't been found to this day. The second victim, Shelley Armitage, was butchered just like the first, except that Stephen filmed the whole thing on his phone and narrated what he was doing. He was only caught the third time after his victim, Suzanne Biemiers, got away, and he had to chase her out of his apartment and then shoot her in the back with his crossbow. Unfortunately for him, the murder was caught on surveillance footage. The police were shocked to see that Stephen realized his mistake and even held up his middle finger at the camera as he dragged Suzanne's dead body back into his house. Obviously, the footage led to his arrest. According to The Guardian, he was convicted of all 3 murders in 2010 and will spend the rest of his years behind bars. 2. The Hungry Lady. Dmitry Bakshiv and his wife, Natalia Bakshiv, were arrested by police after 7 bags of frozen body parts were discovered inside their refrigerator and freezer. The couple has since been accused of killing and cannibalizing at least 30 people. Their victims were chosen by Natalia, who lured unwitting men to their deaths with her online dating profile. The killings went on for 18 years before the couple got caught, with the real mastermind behind it all being Natalia. Natalia even adopted her husband when he was a teenage orphan and then married him when he turned 18. She basically groomed this guy from a small child to be a serial killer. When the police raided the couple's house, they found slices of skin, a jar with pickled human remains, and even cans of steamed meat stored in their kitchen. After Natalia lured the victims to their house, she and Dmitry killed and ate them together. Throughout the murders, Natalia was working at the local military academy as a nurse and was known for bringing in cans of meat to share with her students. The police believe she was feeding them scraps of meat from her victims. 1. Thai cannibal QUEY. QUEY is one of the most notorious serial killers who ever lived in Thailand. He was put to death over 60 years ago after he got caught killing people and eating their organs. He was accused of murdering at least 7 children throughout the Bangkok area. His arrest was in 1958, and when the police apprehended him, they discovered him in possession of a dead boy's body and extracted heart, which he had been planning to eat. But here's the really weird part of the story. After he was put to death, executed by a firing squad later on in 1958, his body was preserved and then put on display at the Sira Raj Hospital. It's been there for 60 years and is still on display today for curious serial killer fans to gawk at. He doesn't look much like a human anymore, with his body all gross and mummy-like. Still, it's definitely one way to deal with murderers. There have been petitions in recent years to give the monster a proper burial, though these requests have largely been ignored.
Number 10. Man kills wife for cheating. So what would you do if you caught your partner cheating on you? Break up with them or file for divorce? No matter what you do, your plans for revenge probably won't be as extreme as this. A 48-year-old man from Texas shot his wife after he allegedly found out she was cheating on him. The man later uploaded a 4-minute video on YouTube to apologize to his children. He was quickly apprehended by police. In the video, he blamed his dead wife and said that the 18-year age difference was terrible for them and that he always knew something was wrong. The man also complains about petty issues like messy hair. In his so-called confessional recording, he is seen telling his children that he warned their mother to not play with his emotions. He also added that he has an audio of his wife talking to another man. According to the woman's mom, who was there when the incident occurred, the man was hiding in the bathroom with a gun. He had threatened to kill both of them. She ran out of the house, but couldn't save her daughter. Number 9. Splitting up. We all want some sweet, tender love and care when we're sick. But what happens when you're not getting that TLC from your spouse when you need it most? A couple in a Cambodian village had the weirdest solution after a marriage of 40 years. The husband chose to end the marriage, all because his wife didn't take care of him when he was sick. There were no courts involved in the divorce. Instead, the village's head governed the split. But it's not the reason for the split or how the marriage ended that got this couple a spot on our list. It's what happened after. The couple only had a house to their name, so the question was, how would they split that? The husband and his friends came up with a quick solution to split the house. Literally. They could have put up a wall and divided the space, but no. Sawing the place in half seemed like a better idea. The man moved his side of the house onto his parents' property, leaving his wife's half on the original site. The house wasn't made of concrete, which is why he could pull this stunt off. But that does not mean it was easy. Talk about splitting up. Number 8. Pay for your spouse's ice cream. Ice cream, ice cream. We all scream for ice cream. When you file for a divorce, you have to give the court a convincing reason to end your marriage. This is when things can take a very sour turn. What usually ensues are blame games and a lot of couples therapy. The proceedings also uncover some cycles of petty disputes. There are only a handful of divorce cases that have been amicable, but when it comes to wacky reasons for divorce, this man from India takes the cake. Or should we say he simply takes the ice cream. In 2013, an Indian man filed for divorce after 23 years of marriage, stating that his wife blew his money on, any guesses? Well, apparently she blew it all on ice cream. Yeah, ice cream. What kind of ice creams were these really? How much exactly? We don't have all the answers. But since that's the reason for divorce, it must have amounted to something big, right? After all the drama, the wife just had one thing to say. The husband was a multi-millionaire. But just because your significant other can afford the delicious frozen treat, doesn't mean you should blow all his money on it. The confused court eventually granted them a divorce, but there was a catch. In her petition, the wife asked for a monthly spousal support amount, a 2-bedroom home that they jointly owned, and child support. The court agreed to an interim allowance, but also threw in a bit of a treat. The judge sure had a sense of humor, because he asked the husband to pay his ex-wife an extra alimony of $150 per month to buy ice cream. Wow, now that's some settlement, right? Number 7, settling scores. Sometimes people just fall out of love. Couples therapy can help, or you call it quits. But this woman had a different set of problems to worry about. Falling out of love was the least of her worries. This woman's husband had hid a secret from her throughout their entire marriage. Turns out he had been keeping a secret diary of all the things that his wife was doing wrong. Could you imagine that? A journal of your mistakes? That is taking pettiness to another level. Maybe it could be justified if the husband was a shining example of himself. But he wasn't. Not only had he cheated on her, he even confessed that he didn't marry her for love. Of all the reasons a person can marry someone, this has to be the most disappointing one. So here's what he said. He married because he wanted help with the rent. They went to therapy to sort out the differences. The therapist told her to end the marriage and get as far away from him as possible. Can you think of any other weird reasons couples chose to split up? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 6, forced to dig up ashes. When marriages end, it can get really messy. Between court battles, child custody, and splitting of assets, it's chaotic for couples. But this man from Australia probably had it worse than most. A couple from South Wales, Mr. and Mrs. Moss, both wanted sole ownership of the farm they were living on. The man held a stable job as a manager and made a decent living, but his aim was to turn the farm into his main source of income, so he was very disappointed when the court gave the verdict in his wife's favor. But that's not the worst of it all. It wasn't just a piece of land for the ex-husband. It held a very close and sentimental value to him. He had built a memorial garden on the farm for his parents that had passed away. He buried their urns next to one another, complete with headstones. The garden also had a golden bust of his father. It's not an unissued thing to bury dear loved ones within the boundaries of an ancestral property. The court ordered him to dig up the ashes and remove the headstones and the bust since the ownership was going to his ex-wife now. But why did the court ask him to dig up the ashes? The judge said he reached his decision based on the fact the headstones above the urns aren't permanently fixed, and he gave Mr. Moss 2 weeks to dig up the site and remove the jars of ashes, as well as the bust of his father. Mr. Moss was heartbroken, saying, "It's not just a block of land or a piece of dirt. It was my parents' home." But since the ashes and headstones fall under the category of movable assets, he was asked to remove them. And the fact that the urns could be moved was actually a significant reason why the court ruled in his wife's favor. Now that's messed up. Number 5, vomiting on her wedding dress. Bad marriages aren't just a thing of the modern world. When you force two incompatible people together, a disaster is bound to happen. We have a page from history to prove that. Princess of Wales, Augusta, didn't just have one of the worst marriages in history, but also one of the most disastrous wedding ceremonies ever. The German princess was sent to Britain at 16 years old as a bride in the arranged royal wedding to the Prince of Wales. The royal family was in such a rush to get the wedding started that they put her in a wedding dress and began the ceremony as soon as Augusta arrived. This was back in the 16th century, so you can imagine how long the journey might have been for her. And the tight corsets and heavy layers of clothing don't exactly sound like the most welcoming thing, especially when you're so tired. As the ceremony began, the princess grew extremely nervous and ended up puking on her gown. That's not the worst part. As her mother-in-law extended her hand to help Augusta, she threw up on her as well. The wedding was just the tip of the iceberg. Augusta's married life was equally bad, with her husband repeatedly cheating on her. He died before he ever got the chance to sit on the throne, and Augusta never became a queen. History, my friends, rarely has a happy ending. Number 4. Weirdest album deal ever. Marrying your boss's sister is never a good idea, but Marvin Gaye was too in love to realize that. The famous singer only had a few hits to his name when he married Anna Gordy in 1964. Anna's brother Barry was the head of Motown Records, which also happened to be the most prominent black music corporation globally. After 12 long years of marriage, Anna filed for a divorce. By then, Marvin was already an international sensation, but other than the massive fan following, he also had a huge drug problem and 2 children from another woman. So the divorce was a no-brainer for Anna. She demanded $1 million, which doesn't sound like a big deal for an artist of Marvin's stature, but it was. Marvin had a cocaine addiction that drained him of most of his money, so he didn't have any for Anna. His lawyer came up with the idea of offering Anna the $305,000 advance made by Motown towards Marvin's next album, plus the first $295,000 it would fetch in sales. Anna took the deal. Since the profits were going to Anna, Marvin didn't intend on making the album a hit. Instead, he used the opportunity to punish Anna with the lyrics. The album became a journal of how the marriage broke. Number 3. Living with the ex. We've all seen public divorces of celebrities and billionaires and their split of assets. Who gets to keep the mansion in Malibu? Who gets the more significant share in the multi-million-dollar business? But most couples don't have those luxuries. What happens when you don't have the assets to split? What happens when both parties are in a desperate need? Something like this happened to a couple in Spain, and the judge had a creative solution, to say the least. The couple had been feuding over the ownership of their house for quite some time when the judge offered a novel solution. She asked the couple to split the 820 square foot house themselves. With no other option in sight, the couple accepted the compromise. Living with your ex might seem like the worst thing ever, but it is still better than facing financial woes. According to the split, the wife will live upstairs with 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and her husband will have a downstairs unit with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The divorced couple also feels that it will be better for the children, except for the terrifying awkwardness that might come with living together. The solution doesn't sound so bad, does it? Number 2. Do the dishes. A marriage is a 50-50 job. You can't expect your partner to do everything for you. But we guess this couple didn't get the memo. They had been married for 5 years, and the woman spent a large part of her day cleaning the house. We all know that keeping a house spick and span is a back-breaking task. The only expectation she had from her partner was that he washed the dishes. No big deal, right? After she had finished her cleaning spree, she came to the kitchen to see that the sink was still full of dishes, and the husband hadn't even touched it. That's when she knew it was time to end the marriage. But wait, was not doing the dishes a viable cause for divorce? Turns out the couple had been facing issues for a long time. The pile of dishes wasn't the only problem. They had a whole heaping pile of feuds. But the dishes sure were the last straw. Next time if things are turning topsy-turvy in your marriage, just be sure the dishes are done. And number 1, YouTube video. Sometimes couples just need that last nudge to realize that they are not the right ones for each other. For this woman, the sign came in the form of a YouTube video. One night, the couple were sitting on the couch watching TV, and she asked her husband to play a YouTube video while his movie was on commercial. He flat out refused and didn't even bother giving her a reason. That was the moment she realized that she couldn't stay in the marriage. Separation based on this incident alone might seem excessive, but it made her realize that she couldn't stay with someone who didn't respect her enough to do something so easy. Sometimes it's the little things that sink the ship. In this case, the remote did hold the key for a lot more than what it is meant to. Thanks for watching. Which of these marriages seem like the worst to you? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.